Have you ever given your whole heart to someone and still felt like it wasn't enough? Have you ever sat in a room full of people and still felt utterly alone? If this sounds like your reality, you're not broken, you're awakening. And what comes next is not an ending, but a return to yourself. Welcome to Whisper to Heal, where we face pain with compassion and turn hurt into wisdom. Today, I want to speak directly to you, to those of you who are tired of explaining too much, giving too much, and staying too long. To those of you who have been called too sensitive, too emotional, or just too much. This episode is about the silent revolution that begins the moment you stop chasing love and start reclaiming yourself. It's about the power that comes not from louder voices or bolder gestures, but from quiet presence and unwavering boundaries. It's about what happens when a woman, or anyone, decides to stop pouring energy into places that refuse to hold it, and instead begins the brave act of returning inward. Let's begin here, with the truth most of us try to ignore. Many of us were never taught how to be alone without feeling lonely. From a young age, we were conditioned to seek our reflection in the eyes of others. Approval became our compass. Love became a reward for performance. We learned how to anticipate needs, how to soften our voice to be liked, how to suppress anger to keep peace. And in doing so, we slowly abandoned our own truth. But no amount of self-sacrifice can convince someone to love you properly. No amount of effort can replace someone else's unwillingness. And so many of us find ourselves depleted, emotionally bankrupt, wondering why our hearts still ache, despite doing everything right. The first turning point in this journey is the moment of stillness, the pause where we stop trying to fix others and start listening to ourselves. And that silence can feel terrifying at first. It's not the silence of peace, but of unfamiliarity. Like Mina, a woman I worked with in her late 50s, she had spent decades giving, supporting, adapting first as a mother, then as a caregiver. Her identity had been stitched together from everyone else's needs. But when her children moved out and her caretaking role ended, she was left with a question that echoed louder than any voice around her. Who am I when no one needs me? She told me her first days of solitude felt like drowning, but slowly she began to anchor into herself. She took morning walks without her phone. She journaled not to be wise, but to be honest. She said no without giving 100 reasons. And as her attention returned to herself, her peace began to grow. This is where healing begins, not in fixing others, but in remembering yourself. Silence, you see, is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is presence. It is choosing not to react when provoked, not because you are powerless, but because you are rooted. There is a kind of silence that says, I hear you, but I will not abandon myself to respond. I see you, but I will no longer shrink to be seen. Many women and many men, too, mistake this silence for giving up. But it's not giving up. It's giving in to something deeper, to clarity, to discernment, to that quiet inner voice that's been waiting for years to be heard. In psychological terms, this is the foundation of emotional sovereignty. Emotional sovereignty is the state in which your inner peace is no longer hostage to external circumstances. It's when your partner's silence doesn't trigger panic, when a friend's distance doesn't spark self-blame, when you stop interpreting rejection as a reflection of your worth. We often believe that we must keep talking to be seen, to be heard, to be loved. But in truth, the most powerful transformations happen in silence. When you withdraw your energy from people and patterns that drain you, you allow space for truth to surface. Not their truth, your truth. Here's something I want you to hold on to. Not everyone will understand your silence, and that's okay. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be true to yourself, and the people meant for you will not need to be convinced. They will feel your truth in your stillness, in your boundaries, in your presence. In my years of clinical practice, I've seen this countless times. A woman who once fought every battle in her marriage with tears and shouting begins to say less. Not because she's checked out, but because she's checking in with herself. She stops trying to prove her love and instead begins to feel it within. Her energy shifts, her posture changes, her decisions become clearer, and slowly, the dynamic around her begins to rearrange. This is not magic, it's resonance. It's the nervous system recalibrating. It's the heart remembering its own rhythm. When we focus on ourselves, not in selfishness, but in sacred awareness, we start to realize that most of what we were fighting for wasn't love. It was validation. It was the hope that someone else would mirror back our worth. But true self-worth isn't something you demand from others. It's something you build within, moment by moment, breath by breath, boundary by boundary. As we continue this series, I will guide you through the remaining stages of this journey, from reclaiming your emotional energy to learning the discipline of strategic withdrawal, to practicing embodied stillness, and finally, to becoming magnetic not through effort, but through alignment. But for now, let me leave you with this. If you're tired, rest. If you're silent, stay there. If you're doubting yourself, remember, healing is not loud. It is quiet, subtle, powerful, and you are not lost. You are returning. In the next part, we will explore what it truly means to reclaim your emotional energy and why overgiving is often a sign of disconnection from self. Until then, take a moment to breathe, to anchor into your body, and to honor the quiet revolution already unfolding within you. If this message has touched something tender in you, I invite you to stay with us through the rest of this journey. Subscribe to Whisper to Heal and share this episode with someone who may need these words today. Let's heal together, one breath, one truth, one silent moment at a time. Reclaiming your emotional energy, the end of overgiving. There comes a moment in every woman's life when she realizes that exhaustion is not just physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual, and it's not because she's weak, but because she's been strong for too long in places where her strength was never meant to be poured. This part of our journey is about energy, not the mystical kind, but the kind you give away when you say yes out of guilt, when you stay quiet to avoid conflict, when you check your phone every few minutes, hoping for a message that never comes. It's the kind you drain when you keep giving more love than someone is willing or even able to receive. If you've ever found yourself depleted after a conversation, if your heart races at the thought of setting a boundary, or if you've ever wondered, why do I always feel like I'm the one trying? You're not alone, and more importantly, you're not crazy. You're caught in a pattern of emotional overextension. And today, we begin the work of reclaiming your energy and returning it home to you. As a therapist, I've worked with countless women who live in a constant state of emotional output. They over-explain, overcompensate, and overfunction in their relationships, hoping that their efforts will create safety, intimacy, or validation. But here's the truth we rarely speak. Love that is earned through overgiving is never truly safe, because it's built on performance, not presence. Overgiving is not love, it's self-abandonment. It's a coping strategy developed by the part of you that believes you have to earn your place in someone's life. And often, that belief was born long before any romantic relationship. For many, it traces back to childhood, to the emotional labor of keeping peace in a chaotic home, to the subtle lessons that taught you love is conditional, to the fear that says, if you don't give enough, you'll be left behind. But my dear, you're not that little girl anymore, and you don't have to keep proving your worth to be loved. Let me introduce you to the principle I teach in my sessions. Attention is currency. Where you spend it, your energy flows. And where your energy flows, your emotional reality is shaped. If you keep spending it on people who deplete you, who invalidate your boundaries, or who take without reciprocating, you'll always feel emotionally bankrupt no matter how much you try to be enough. It's time to ask yourself one of the most life-changing questions. Where is my energy going? Take a moment to reflect on your current relationships. How many of them feel nourishing? How many leave you feeling empty? Where do you feel seen and supported? And where do you feel invisible, like your presence is tolerated more than treasured? Now, I want you to breathe. Close your eyes, if you can, and place your hand gently on your heart. This is not a performance. This is a pause, a sacred pause, to recognize that your emotional energy is sacred. It is not meant to be scattered. It is meant to be directed with intention. Reclaiming your emotional energy begins with awareness. The moment you start to observe your patterns instead of judging them, you create space for transformation. You start to see where your automatic responses, like saying yes when you mean no, or apologizing just to keep the peace, are rooted not in kindness, but in fear. A client of mine, Isabel, once described her emotional life as leaking out in 100 directions. She was a natural giver, empathetic, intuitive, always tuned in to the needs of others. But she often found herself exhausted, resentful, and confused. Why do I feel so empty after being with people I love? She asked me one day. Together, we explored her boundaries, or more accurately, her lack of them. She had been trained, like so many women, to believe that love meant self-sacrifice, that saying yes, even when it hurt, was a virtue. But slowly, we began the work of teaching her a new truth. Boundaries are not walls. They are doorways through which healthy love can enter. We practiced saying no without apology. We rehearsed, pausing before responding. And perhaps most importantly, we worked on helping her validate her own feelings without needing others to agree. And over time, something shifted. She no longer left every interaction feeling drained. She began to notice how people responded to her new energy. Some drew closer, appreciating the authenticity. Others drifted away, unable to tolerate her newfound self-respect. And that was okay, because she wasn't trying to keep everyone anymore. She was trying to keep herself. This is the power of reclaiming your emotional energy. You stop chasing. You stop explaining. You start choosing. You begin to recognize that your feelings are not inconveniences. They are information. They tell you where your energy is being honored and where it's being stolen. Let's talk about one more essential truth. Overgiving is often a trauma response. It's the nervous system trying to create safety through control. If I give more, maybe they'll stay. If I love harder, maybe they'll choose me. But this kind of love is rooted in fear, not freedom. And freedom is the soil in which real love grows. If you want to shift out of this pattern, here are a few small but powerful steps to begin today. 1. Practice daily check-ins with yourself. Ask, what do I feel right now? What do I need? Do I feel expanded or contracted after that interaction? 2. Set one small boundary this week. It could be saying no to a request, asking for more space, or simply not responding immediately to a message that drains you. 3. Stop over-explaining your boundaries. A boundary is a sentence, not a paragraph. 4. When guilt arises, which it will recognize it as a conditioned response, not a moral compass. You're not selfish for taking care of yourself. 5. Redirect your energy. Instead of pouring into someone who isn't meeting you halfway, pour into yourself. Read, rest, journal. Take a walk in nature. Breathe deeply. You don't owe your life to anyone who makes you feel like loving them is a burden. You don't have to shrink to be kept, and you don't have to break yourself into pieces for someone who never learned how to hold love gently. Reclaiming your emotional energy is not about closing your heart. It's about opening it to yourself first. In the next part, we'll explore the practice of strategic withdrawal, not as a game, not as manipulation, but as a sacred discipline that protects your energy and reveals the truth of your relationships without a single word. Until then, I invite you to reflect. Where have you been giving too much, too soon, too often? And what would it feel like to bring that energy home to you? If this episode touched your heart, please support Whisper to Heal by subscribing, sharing this podcast, and leaving a review. Your presence here matters more than you know. Let's continue walking this healing path together, one truth at a time. The wisdom of strategic withdrawal, when silence speaks louder than words. Have you ever felt like no matter how much you explain yourself, defend yourself, or try to make things right, you're met with misunderstanding, dismissal, or emotional distance? That ache inside you, the one that rises when your words don't land, when your heart isn't heard, that's the place where today's healing begins. This part of our journey is not about walking away in anger. It's not about punishing anyone. It's about choosing yourself, not from ego, but from clarity. We are talking about the practice of strategic withdrawal, a powerful and often misunderstood form of emotional protection that allows you to step back, not to run, but to realign. In my years as a clinical psychologist and therapist, I've watched women pour every last drop of energy into trying to repair relationships that were never truly reciprocal. I've listened to them cry in my office, saying things like, "If I just explain it better," or "Maybe if I'm more patient, they'll understand," or worse, "Maybe I'm just asking for too much." But here's the truth that often goes unspoken. If someone consistently disregards your feelings, disrespects your boundaries, or dismisses your truth, it's not your job to teach them how to treat you. It's your job to decide how long you'll allow yourself to be treated that way. Strategic withdrawal is a sacred pause. It is the moment when you stop trying to fix the connection and start tending to the disconnection inside yourself. Let me share a story of a woman named Elena, a brilliant and compassionate soul who had been in a relationship for 6 years. Her partner was emotionally inconsistent, affectionate one moment, cold the next. She always felt like she had to earn his love, like she had to work harder to make the relationship survive. Her body was constantly tense. Her mind raced with anxiety. She was exhausted. One day, after yet another argument where he blamed her for being too emotional, something shifted. She didn't scream. She didn't plead. She simply became quiet, not in passive aggression, but in a kind of solemn peace. She chose silence not because she had nothing to say, but because she finally realized he wasn't willing to hear her. She moved into the guest room that night, not as an ultimatum, but as a line in the sand. And in the days that followed, she did something radical. She did nothing. No long texts, no begging, no chasing. She focused inward. She went for long walks. She cried. She meditated. She wrote in her journal. And slowly, her nervous system began to calm. That silence revealed more than any argument ever could. It revealed how much of her energy had been spent trying to be understood by someone who didn't truly want to understand her. It revealed how often she had silenced her own intuition just to keep the peace. It revealed that the most loving thing she could do for both of them was to step away. Strategic withdrawal is not ghosting. It's not manipulation. It's not giving the silent treatment. It's not about playing games. It is an intentional choice to step back so that you can listen to your own voice above the noise of the relationship. It is a return to your own emotional center, a reclaiming of your energy, and a refusal to keep pouring yourself into a space that cannot hold you. Sometimes, silence is not a void. It is a mirror. It reflects the reality of the relationship more clearly than words ever could. When you stop chasing, you find out who's willing to walk with you. When you stop explaining, you find out who values your truth without needing it to be convenient. When you stop initiating, you find out who genuinely wants to meet you where you are. In moments of emotional chaos, it's tempting to speak louder, to argue harder, to try one more time. But strategic withdrawal asks a different question. Is this dynamic even worthy of your voice anymore? So how do you know when it's time to practice strategic withdrawal? Let me offer you a few signs that I've observed, both in clinical work and in the stories women have entrusted to me. 1. You feel like you're constantly over-explaining yourself. Your truths are not received. You keep saying the same things, and yet nothing changes. 2. Your boundaries are repeatedly ignored. You set limits, but they're not respected. You're accused of being dramatic or difficult. 3. You feel emotionally unsafe. You walk on eggshells. You hide parts of yourself just to keep the peace. 4. You're the only one doing the emotional work. You initiate every hard conversation. You carry the weight of maintaining the relationship. 5. You're becoming someone you don't recognize. You feel smaller, quieter, or angrier. You're abandoning yourself to stay connected. If you recognize yourself in any of these, I want you to know, choosing to withdraw is not failure. It is wisdom. It's saying, I love myself enough to stop trying to force what isn't flowing. It's saying, I am worthy of spaces where my presence is cherished, not tolerated. There is something deeply powerful about becoming unavailable to chaos. When you step back, you shift the dynamic. You give the relationship space to breathe. And more importantly, you give yourself the dignity of not begging for what should be freely given. In one of my meditation retreats, I guided a woman through this very transition. She had been stuck in a cycle of emotional overfunctioning, constantly trying to make it work with a partner who never met her halfway. Through breathwork and silence, she came face to face with a deeper truth. Her fear of being alone had led her to accept breadcrumbs in place of real love. But in that silence, she realized she was not lonely. She was simply unused to her own company. And when she stopped running from herself, she discovered she was whole all along. That's the paradox of strategic withdrawal. You step back to get closer to yourself. You don't do it to change the other person. You do it to change your relationship with yourself. And often, when you truly step back emotionally, mentally, energetically, you see what you couldn't see before. Some relationships fall away, revealing they were only held together by your effort. Others strengthen because the other person rises to meet your integrity. But either way, you win because you have stopped betraying yourself. Here's what I want you to remember. You do not need to explain your silence to people who made you feel unseen. You do not need to justify your need for peace. And you do not need to keep proving your worth to people who never learned how to recognize it. Silence, when chosen with intention, is a boundary. It's a filter. It's a reclaiming. So if you've been caught in a cycle of emotional exhaustion, I invite you to pause, to pull back, to stop talking for a moment, not because you don't care, but because you care too much about yourself to keep begging to be heard. In the next part, we'll explore how to ground yourself in embodied stillness. We'll go deeper into how your body, breath, and posture communicate more about your self-worth than any words ever could, and how reclaiming your physical presence is one of the most radical acts of self-respect. Until then, whisper this to yourself gently. I am not abandoning anyone. I am returning to me. If this episode helped you pause and reflect, please support the Whisper to Heal community by subscribing, sharing, or leaving a review. Your voice, even in silence, is part of this healing collective. And together, we are remembering how to come home to ourselves. Embodied stillness. When your presence speaks before you do, there's a moment in every woman's journey where she realizes that her body has been telling her truth long before her words ever tried. Her slouched shoulders whispered of burden. Her clenched jaw hinted at swallowed words. Her tired eyes revealed the weight of emotional labor she was too conditioned to acknowledge. And yet, she kept going. She kept showing up, speaking kindly, giving generously, while her body screamed what her voice was too afraid to say. This part of our journey, dear listener, is about coming back to your body, to the language it speaks, to the truth it holds. It is about embodied stillness, the kind of calm that doesn't just quiet the mind, but grounds the entire nervous system in truth. And when a woman learns to hold herself with stillness, not only does she stop performing for love, she begins to radiate it from within. Welcome back to Whisper to Heal. I'm so honored to walk with you through this deeper part of our healing path. As a psychologist, a relationship therapist, and a longtime meditation practitioner, I've learned that many women don't just lose their voices, they lose their bodies. Not literally, but emotionally. They disconnect. They live from the neck up, analyzing, overthinking, rehearsing conversations in their head, replaying wounds, preparing for reactions, and they wonder why they feel so tired, so scattered, so ungrounded. Embodied stillness is the practice of returning to your breath, to your center, to the sacred truth that your presence is a message before you ever speak. Let me tell you about Maya. Maya was a quiet, competent professional in her early 40s. She had climbed high in her career, always careful to be agreeable, polished, soft-spoken. But in meetings, her ideas were often overlooked. People talked over her. She felt invisible. One day in therapy, I asked her, "How do you sit when you speak? Where do your eyes go?" She was surprised by the question. But later, she told me that in meetings, she often hunched her shoulders, looked down, and held her breath. Her body was saying, "I don't believe in my own voice." So we started small. Every morning, 5 minutes barefoot on the floor, deep breathing, shoulders back, spine straight, no fixing, just feeling. I asked her to say nothing, but to become present, to inhabit her body with full awareness. After 2 weeks, something shifted. The next time she spoke in a meeting, she looked up, she held her posture, she paused before responding, and people listened, not because she said anything louder, but because her body said, "I believe in what I'm saying." This is the quiet power of embodied stillness. You don't have to push. You don't have to shout. You have to be. Posture, breath, tone, eye contact. These are not just soft skills. They are emotional frequencies. They communicate more than rehearsed words ever could. When your inner world is chaotic, your body follows. When your mind races with doubt, your breath shortens. When you anticipate rejection, your voice gets small. But when you begin to breathe consciously, when you anchor into your body as a home, not a battlefield, you change the entire tone of your presence. From a scientific standpoint, this is deeply connected to the autonomic nervous system. You have two branches, the sympathetic system, which is your fight or flight mode, and the parasympathetic system, which is your rest and digest mode. Embodied stillness activates the latter. It tells your body, I am safe. I don't need to defend. I can simply be. Now I know what you might be thinking. That sounds beautiful, but I've spent years being anxious, reactive, triggered. How do I start? You start by pausing. Just once a day, inhale deeply, hold, exhale slowly. That breath, repeated, becomes a doorway to regulation. It's not about achieving perfect calm. It's about shifting the pattern. Each time you breathe intentionally, instead of reacting impulsively, you teach your nervous system a new way of being. This is not a spiritual trend. This is a biological reset. And over time, this regulation becomes your default. Let me give you another story. Jazz, a passionate woman in her 30s, told me she often erupted in relationships, defensive, loud, argumentative, not because she didn't care, but because she cared too much. She feared being misunderstood. Every time someone questioned her, she reacted to protect herself, but each reaction drained her. She would cry after arguments, not because she regretted defending herself, but because she didn't feel powerful doing it. I guided her through a practice of silent grounding. Before responding to any trigger, she would pause. One breath, one grounding question. Is this worth my energy? That moment of stillness, that breath, changed everything. Over time, she no longer reacted from fear. She responded from foundation. And here's what happened. People started respecting her more. Not because she intimidated them, but because she was anchored. She became the calm in the storm, not the storm itself. That's what embodied stillness does. It teaches you to trust yourself again. It brings your intuition back online. It lets your body become a safe space, not one you escape, but one you return to. And in love, this is everything. Because relationships are not built on the words we speak, but the energy we bring. If your energy is scattered, anxious, overgiving, your relationships will reflect that. But if your presence is steady, aware, and self-respecting, you will attract and hold relationships that mirror that same stability. So how do you begin this journey of embodied stillness? Here are a few simple practices I teach. 1. Morning ground. Before touching your phone, take 5 deep breaths. Place one hand on your chest, one on your belly. Feel your breath. Anchor in your body. 2. Posture check. During the day, notice your posture. Are you collapsed? Tense? Pull your shoulders back. Lift your spine. Let your body speak of dignity. 3. Breath before words. Before responding to any emotional situation, pause. Inhale slowly. Exhale even slower. This one breath can save you from 100 regrets. 4. Mirror work. Look into your own eyes. Not to judge, but to return. Say out loud, I am safe. I am here. I choose peace. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about coming home to yourself. And the more you come home, the less you chase. The more still you become, the more visible your strength is. You no longer have to scream your boundaries. Your body holds them for you. You no longer have to over-explain. Your energy speaks your truth. When a woman learns to live in her body, not from fear, but from reverence, she becomes untouchable. Not in the sense of pushing people away, but in the sense that nothing outside her can shake what's rooted inside her. This is your birthright, to be whole, to be at home within yourself. And no matter how far you've drifted from that center, you can return right now with just one breath. In the next part, we'll go deeper into emotional sovereignty. How to feel deeply without losing yourself. How to be sensitive without being consumed. And how to finally stop being responsible for other people's emotions and start owning your own. Until then, breathe gently, sit softly, walk slowly. The world is already shifting around your stillness, and if this resonated with you, please take a moment to subscribe to Whisper to Heal. Share this episode with someone who needs to come back home to their body. Your presence in this community helps the healing ripple farther than we can imagine. Emotional sovereignty. Feeling everything without losing yourself. What if I told you that you could feel everything without being consumed by anything? That it's possible to be deeply sensitive, wildly loving, beautifully empathetic, and yet still rooted, whole, and unshakably clear within yourself. So many of us, especially as women, have been taught that love means merging, that caring means carrying, that feeling deeply means we're supposed to absorb everyone else's chaos, pain, and moods. But that belief has led us to emotional exhaustion, not emotional intimacy, and it's time to unlearn it. Welcome back to Whisper to Heal. I'm grateful you're still walking this journey with me. In this part of our healing conversation, I want to introduce you to the most important tool I've ever discovered, not just as a psychologist or therapist, but as a woman who has felt heartbreak, confusion, deep emotional overwhelm, and the temptation to lose myself in someone else's storm. That tool is emotional sovereignty. What does that mean? It means you no longer let your inner peace rise and fall with someone else's behavior. It means your nervous system doesn't go into overdrive every time someone withdraws, criticizes, or misunderstands you. It means you feel your emotions fully, but you're no longer ruled by them. You own your emotional world, rather than outsourcing your power to those who do not know how to hold it. And let me tell you, getting here is not about becoming cold, it's about becoming clear. Let's take a real-life example. Sophia, a woman I worked with in her late 30s, had a pattern of losing herself in every relationship. She gave everything her time, her body, her emotions, her availability, hoping that her depth of care would be matched. But it never was. And when conflict came, she either shut down or exploded. She felt small, silenced, or so reactive that she couldn't recognize herself. She told me, "I don't know how to not feel everything. I carry everyone's emotions like they're mine." That sentence is where we began, and maybe it's where you are now too. Emotional sovereignty is the antidote. It starts not with boundaries, but with awareness, not with confrontation, but with returning to your center, not with pushing people away, but with stopping the habit of abandoning yourself. You see, every time you react without reflection, you give your power away. Every time you personalize someone else's behavior, you become a passenger in your own emotional world. Every time you betray your gut instinct for the sake of keeping peace, you reinforce the belief that your emotional safety depends on other people. But it doesn't. It depends on you. And when you finally come home to that truth, something inside you shifts permanently. Sophia began a simple practice. Every time she felt overwhelmed, triggered, misunderstood, or tempted to explain herself just to be heard, she paused. She said 3 words to herself: return to center. Not return to logic, not return to judgment, return to center. It didn't mean she avoided feeling. It meant she created space to feel with intention. That's the secret, creating space between the feeling and the reaction. Most people think power comes from quick responses, snappy comebacks, setting boundaries with fire. But true power, especially emotional power, comes in the pause. When you pause, you reclaim authorship of your energy. When you pause, you give your nervous system time to regulate. When you pause, you remember who you are. Here's what that looked like for Sophia. During an argument with her partner, instead of escalating, she said, "Give me a moment." She stepped away, sat down, put her hand on her chest, and breathed. She asked herself, "What am I actually feeling? Is this about him or something deeper?" That one moment of reflection gave her an answer she wasn't expecting. She wasn't just mad about his tone. She was reliving years of not feeling respected. Old wounds had been reopened. But this time, she didn't react from those wounds. She responded from her awareness. That conversation, she told me later, was the first one in years that didn't end in emotional chaos. It wasn't perfect, but it was present. And that presence changed everything. So how do you build emotional sovereignty? Let's explore the foundational practices. 1. Name the emotion, but don't become the emotion. You are not your sadness. You are not your anger. You are not your fear. You are the witness of those things, the one who can feel, notice, hold, and release them. When you name your emotions aloud, this is grief, this is anxiety, this is disappointment, you separate your identity from the feeling. You become the container, not the contents. 2. Create emotional boundaries. Not walls, but filters. Boundaries are not meant to shut people out. They're meant to keep your emotional world clean, clear, and consistent. A simple internal boundary might sound like, "Their disappointment doesn't mean I've done something wrong," or "I can feel compassion without taking responsibility for their healing." 3. Cultivate nervous system awareness. Most of our reactivity comes from dysregulation. We snap not because we're mean, but because we're triggered. We shut down not because we don't care, but because our system is overwhelmed. Learn to read your body's cues. A tight chest, a clenched jaw, a racing heart. These are signs it's time to pause, breathe, and come home. 4. Stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. This is one of the most painful, powerful shifts. When you no longer make it your mission to be understood by everyone, you conserve energy. You no longer beg for emotional permission. You let your silence, your consistency, and your integrity speak for you. Let's talk about a myth that keeps women trapped. The myth that being emotionally available means being emotionally overexposed. Many of us grew up learning that love means always being open, always being vulnerable, always being available. But availability without discernment is self-abandonment. Vulnerability without safety is re-traumatization. You do not have to be an open wound to be authentic. You can be both soft and sovereign, both open-hearted and deeply boundaried, both emotionally present and emotionally discerning. And when you reach that place, your relationships shift radically. You begin to recognize emotional patterns as mirrors. You no longer react to everything someone says or does. You observe, you reflect, you choose your response, and you no longer internalize the chaos of others. You see what belongs to you and what doesn't. I want to share a powerful reminder. Not everything deserves your energy. Not every message needs a reply. Not every emotion needs to be acted on. Not every misunderstanding needs a clarification. Not every silence needs to be filled. When you begin to trust that your energy is sacred, you stop leaking it. And what replaces that emotional leakage is power, calm, confidence, peace. So here's what I invite you to carry from this part of our journey. You are allowed to feel deeply and still remain rooted in your truth. You are allowed to love fully and still protect your energy. You are allowed to care without carrying everything. Your emotional world is yours to tend. And as you tend it with care, compassion, and clarity, you become someone who doesn't just know peace, you are peace. In part 6, we'll explore the final piece of this powerful transformation: strategic withdrawal. How to know when silence is the most healing answer. How to step back not in bitterness, but in wisdom. And how to let your energy speak louder than your voice. If this message resonated with you, please take a moment to subscribe to Whisper to Heal and share this podcast with someone who's ready to reclaim their emotional freedom. Your journey matters. Your healing matters. And the more you return to yourself, the more the world rearranges to meet the truest version of you. Strategic withdrawal. When silence is the most healing answer. Let me ask you something tender. Have you ever found yourself pouring into someone who only leaves you emptier? Explaining your heart over and over, only to be met with indifference, defensiveness, or silence? Have you ever stayed in a space long after it stopped being safe, simply because you were afraid of what would happen if you stepped back? If you have, this part of the journey is for you. Welcome back to Whisper to Heal. I'm so grateful that you've stayed with me through this exploration. As a psychologist, a relationship therapist, and someone who has walked the quiet roads of meditation and self-inquiry for decades, I can tell you this: silence is not just a retreat. Silence is sometimes a revolution. Today, we are going to speak about strategic withdrawal, not ghosting, not punishment, not passive aggression, but the conscious, powerful choice to pull back in order to come home to yourself. Strategic withdrawal is the sacred decision to stop bleeding energy where it is not honored. It is how you protect your nervous system, your peace, and your sense of truth when you're in relationships or environments that confuse you, drain you, or leave you doubting your own worth. Many women come to me in pain, asking, why does this person keep hurting me? Why do I feel like I'm shrinking in this relationship? Why do I always end up in dynamics where I give everything and still feel unseen? And my answer, though gentle, is clear. It's because your energy has not yet learned to protect itself. When you have not yet practiced strategic withdrawal, you stay too long. You speak too much. You over-explain. You argue with patterns that have no intention of changing. You fight for understanding in conversations that are not built on mutual respect. But when you begin to understand the power of distance, everything shifts. Let's take the story of Amira. Amira had been in an on and off relationship for 6 years. There was love, yes, but also deep cycles of emotional unavailability, hot and cold behavior, broken promises, and deep confusion. Every time she tried to set boundaries, he would apologize temporarily. Every time she expressed her needs, he'd listen, but then slowly drift back into the same old patterns. One day, something changed. Not because he changed, but because she did. She stopped explaining. She stopped trying to be understood. She didn't send a dramatic message or declare her worth with loud words. She simply chose silence. And in that silence, she heard herself again. Not the anxious self that said, "Make it work," but the deeper voice that whispered, "Let it go." That silence became her boundary. That stillness became her strength. And from that moment forward, she no longer needed closure because she had clarity. Strategic withdrawal is clarity in action. It's what happens when you finally understand that your presence is not something to give lightly. It is a gift, a sacred offering, and it belongs only where it is valued, respected, and met with reciprocity. Let's break down what strategic withdrawal is and what it is not. It is not ghosting to punish, withdrawing in silence out of passive aggression, giving the silent treatment to manipulate. It is a pause to reconnect with your own truth, a sacred space to observe rather than react, a decision to stop investing in a dynamic that is not nourishing your spirit. Silence, when intentional, reveals everything. When you stop initiating, you find out who values connection enough to reach for you. When you stop explaining, you discover who is truly interested in understanding you. When you stop chasing, you see who is capable of meeting you in presence. And most importantly, you see yourself, your patterns, your longings, your wounds, your hopes, because here's what no one tells you. Silence is a mirror. In silence, your truth has space to speak. But it takes courage. It takes courage to stop reaching out, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. It takes courage to sit in discomfort and not fill the space with another message, another apology, another attempt to fix what is not yours to fix. It takes courage to let the silence speak on your behalf and trust that it will say what words cannot. Let's talk about the biology of withdrawal. When you are constantly reacting, explaining, and trying to manage emotional tension, your nervous system stays in a chronic state of activation. Fight or flight becomes your default. Your body begins to confuse stress with connection, drama with passion, chaos with love. But when you withdraw strategically, when you pause and breathe, your body gets a new signal. I am safe. I can choose. Your breath deepens. Your mind clears. Your perception sharpens. And in that space, you realize something life-changing. You don't need to beg for love. You don't need to perform for validation. You don't need to fight to be chosen. You only need to align with the love that mirrors the respect you've finally given yourself. This kind of withdrawal isn't isolation. It's realignment. It's when you stop asking, "Do they love me?" and start asking, "Do I feel whole here?" It's when you stop wondering, "Why are they doing this to me?" and start noticing, "Why am I still here, offering myself to a space that does not meet me?" There is grief in this clarity, but also liberation, because once you withdraw from what depletes you, you make space for what heals you. It may not come immediately. It may take time, but the world cannot meet the real you until you stop hiding her behind constant caretaking, emotional overfunctioning, and the hunger to be chosen. So, how do you know when it's time to withdraw? Here are the signs. When conversations become repetitive cycles, not opportunities for growth. When you explain the same boundary more than twice. When your nervous system feels constantly tense in someone's presence. When you're showing up more for potential than for reality. When your energy is met with silence, dismissal, or manipulation. And most importantly, when you no longer recognize yourself in the mirror because you've been trying so hard to be what someone else needs that you've forgotten who you are. That's when it's time to step back, time to breathe, time to come home to yourself. In your withdrawal, something beautiful happens. Your frequency shifts. You're no longer chasing energy that drains you. You're protecting the sacredness of your peace. And that protection becomes your superpower. People feel it, even those who don't understand it. They may say, "You've changed." They may say, "You've become distant." But what they're really feeling is your boundary, your refusal to explain what no longer needs to be justified, your commitment to listen to your own voice, louder than the noise of their projections. And that, dear one, is healing in its highest form. You don't need to be angry to walk away. You don't need to be broken to choose silence. You don't need permission to rest your energy in your own hands. You only need the quiet, knowing that you matter, that your presence is precious, that your peace is priceless, that your healing is holy. So let me leave you with this final truth. When a woman turns inward, not to hide, but to hear herself, she becomes unstoppable. When she chooses silence, not to punish, but to preserve, she becomes magnetic. And when she walks away, not from love, but toward truth, she becomes free. Thank you for walking this journey with me on Whisper to Heal. If this podcast touched you, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who is ready to come home to themselves. Your presence here matters, and the more you return to your center, the more the world aligns with the truth of who you are. Keep listening, keep healing, and remember, you are not alone. You are not too much, and you never have to abandon yourself again. I'll meet you in the stillness. Until next time.